JohnAFarrell, Richard Nixon, The Life. Delve into the complex and intriguing life of one of America's most controversial figures, Richard Nixon, the 37th President of the United States. JohnAFarrell's Richard Nixon, The Life offers an in-depth exploration of Nixon's notable achievements and scandals, as well as the circumstances that shaped him. Discover Nixon's humble beginnings in a small Californian town, his strategic journey through college, his service in the Navy, and the ruthless tactics he employed to secure his political victories. Witness how this once optimistic and ambitious young man transformed into a calculating and deeply insecure leader, caught in a web of secrecy, paranoia, and deception.
Richard Nixon's early life and ambitions. Richard Nixon's early years were shaped by family tragedies and financial struggles. Yet, he excelled at school and resolved to study law and enter politics to do good. After graduation, he struggled but eventually found his feet and even became a partner. He met Thelma Ryan, known as Pat, and they married quietly in 1940. He realized that time in service would be vital for anyone wanting a future in politics during World War II. He wondered whether he could go far despite his background, lack of connections, and uptightness. Nixon's political rise and ruthless tactics. The book delves into Nixon's ascension in politics and his willingness to employ any means necessary to win, even if it means dragging his opponent's name through the mud. Running for Congress, Nixon successfully smeared his opponent as a communist sympathizer, despite his opponent's anti-communist record. He then went on to join the notorious WAC committee, where he distinguished himself as a tenacious investigator, most notably in his pursuit of Alger-Hiss. The book explores how Nixon's willingness to use questionable tactics was a harbinger of things to come. Nixon's rise to power. Richard Nixon, a skilled anti-communist campaigner, rose through U.S. politics by portraying his opponents as communist sympathizers and sabotaging the 1952 Republican National Convention to earn a spot as Dwight D. Eisenhower's running mate. His career faced setbacks as he was accused of financial irregularities, but his checkers speech on television remarkably saved his political future. He became vice president in 1953 through his remarkable political tactics. Nixon's rise and fall. The book recounts the rise and fall of Richard Nixon's political career. It begins with Eisenhower sending him on a tour of Asia and the Middle East, where he proved to be an able diplomat. However, upon returning home, Nixon's personal life was unstable, and he promised his wife he would soon be done with politics. When Eisenhower had a heart attack, Nixon stepped up and managed to find the energy he needed. After their landslide victory in 1956, Nixon became a leading voice for civil rights, but had to toe a delicate line to avoid alienating white Southern voters during his presidential campaign in 1960. Although the campaign was close, Nixon lost to Kennedy, and he returned to California as a bitter and unhappy figure. Nixon's journey into politics. This summary outlines Richard Nixon's path to the presidency, which was marked by his involvement in the Vietnam War and his reputation as the candidate for Middle America. From his travels with Pepsi-Cola to his interference in the possible power-sharing arrangement between North and South Vietnam, Nixon's determination to win the election led to some controversial decisions. The madman theory and bombing of Cambodia were two such decisions that backfired spectacularly. In the end, Nixon's presidency was defined by his efforts to maintain stability at home and abroad, even as the Cold War escalated and the country's political landscape shifted. Nixon's pragmatism, flexibility over ideology. The book provides insights into Nixon's leadership style, with a focus on his pragmatism, centrism, and flexibility over ideology. Despite being influenced by Eisenhower, Nixon's insecurity, paranoia, and deep-rooted prejudices marred his presidency. He oversaw strides in desegregation while avoiding taking credit for it to maintain the Southern vote. Nixon had no real ideology, and politically he was infinitely flexible. Former President Nixon had idolized Eisenhower, with his decisiveness and centrism, and had sought to emulate him. However, there were significant differences between the two leaders, including Nixon's dislike for his newly assigned social engagements and his tendency to fan flames in crises. One of the book's focal points is on Nixon's absence of ideology and his pragmatic leadership style. His advisors discovered that Nixon did not have a particular plan for his presidency. Nixon was not wedded to any stance that could cost him votes, although he had personal opinions on divisive social issues such as gun control, gay rights, and abortion, with the latter deserving a blunt response: "Get the hell off it." Civil rights progressed under Nixon's leadership, but he refused to take credit to retain the Southern vote. Nixon's vice president, Spiro Agnew's piano performance at a dinner in 1970, lampooned their apparent slipperiness on the issue of race. Nixon's insecurity and paranoia fueled his unprecedented recordings of his decisions secretly, which enabled him to order surveillance and sabotage operations of political rivals, journalists, and Jews. Despite being a family man, Nixon's deep-rooted prejudices, insecurity, and paranoia, which were compounded by the stress and burden of his duties, created significant challenges. His tendency to rely on sleeping pills and other medications, as well as his inability to control his alcohol intake, only added to his issues and stains on his legacy. In conclusion, the book provides insights into the Nixon presidency, highlighting Nixon's pragmatism and centrism, which enabled him to govern without a robust ideology. Nonetheless, Nixon's presidency remains marred by his deep-rooted prejudices, paranoia, and insecurity, which resulted in some appalling decisions and actions. Nixon's game-changing visit to China. During Nixon's first term, he faced challenges such as Vietnam and the stalled economy. To rally support, he made a historic visit to China, which had been isolated from the West for years. Nixon's administration managed to warm U.S.-China relations, leading to the thaw and eventual visit. While the trip was a huge success, it came at a cost. Nixon needed Pakistan's support to reach China, so he refused to condemn them despite human rights violations in East Pakistan. Nixon's administration also took the country's money supply off the gold standard without a clear plan, fueling the economy but posing long-term consequences. Nixon won the 1972 election largely due to the success of the China visit, but scandals like Watergate would soon follow. Nixon's paranoia and the Watergate scandal. The article follows Nixon's downfall and how his paranoia led to the Watergate scandal and his unprecedented tactics. Nixon's presidency was on the rise with preliminary talks with China, secret negotiations with the Soviets, and the success of peace negotiations in Vietnam. However, everything changed when the New York Times leaked the Pentagon Papers. Nixon's fear of letting the leak go unchallenged resulted in his paranoid frenzy. As a result, the Supreme Court ruled Nixon's attempted press suppression unconstitutional. Nixon then established the Special Investigations Unit, which carried out underhanded tactics to bring down his enemies. The poorly executed break-in at the Watergate office complex eventually led to Nixon's downfall. Nixon's downfall. Nixon's presidency was marked by the Watergate scandal, a complex cover-up of illegal activities that ultimately led to his resignation. Despite surviving the scandal initially, events like the Vietnam War and Nixon's own recordings contributed to his downfall. In 1972, a break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters at the Watergate complex revealed a web of illegal activities linked to Nixon's re-election campaign. Nixon's team tried to suppress the investigation, but the cover-up only made things worse. Deep Throat, a source within the government, leaked damaging information to the media. Nixon's re-election campaign was successful, thanks in part to the normalization of U.S. relations with China and the strategic arms limitation talks with Russia. However, the Vietnam War and Watergate continued to haunt him. Nixon pulled out a final trick by withdrawing U.S. troops from Vietnam, but this move effectively meant defeat for the U.S. As the investigation into Watergate intensified, incriminating evidence was found on Nixon's tapes. The battle over whether to disclose the tapes as evidence ultimately led to Nixon's resignation. He was succeeded by Gerald Ford, who issued him a presidential pardon. Nixon's life after his resignation was marked by attempts to clear his name, but he ultimately accepted defeat. He died in 1994, nearly 20 years after his resignation. Despite his accomplishments, he will always be remembered for his role in the Watergate scandal and his eventual downfall.
Farrell's Richard Nixon, The Life, reveals the layers of paradox and contradiction that define the man behind the presidency. Nixon was a pragmatist, willing to adapt and change for the sake of political survival. Despite personal prejudices, he occasionally demonstrated progressive tendencies on matters such as civil rights. Nixon's ultimate downfall, however, stemmed from his inability to escape the cycle of secrecy and paranoia that haunted him throughout his career. From the Watergate scandal to the tumultuous end of his presidency, the Nixon legacy serves as a cautionary tale about the excesses of power and the dangers of deceptive tactics.